All right, let's get started. Good evening and welcome to Bursaries 101. My name is Megan. I'm a coordinator with Student Financial Support. In the chat today, I am joined by Minder, who is also a coordinator here at Student Financial Support. You are in such good hands today. Minder and I do bursary applications all the time and are advisors on this program. So if you have any questions today, do please put them in the chat. Minder will take care of them while I'm doing the presentation. And then after the presentation, there will be probably 15 to 20 minutes or so for questions if you'd prefer to unmute your mic. Just another note that this presentation is for the international bursary only. So if you are a domestic student, this is not the correct presentation. You do need to go to the domestic supplementary bursary. We are offering sessions on that as well. So feel free to just leave and sign up for one of those. Bursaries are also for current students only. So if you are an incoming student next year, you might find more value in our Scholarships 101 presentations, um, which are located on our website, uab.ca/awards. And you'll get lots of good information about entrance scholarships. But bursaries are a little bit too far ahead for you. So, this presentation was sort of developed because many students had a desire to know more about the bursary application process and how it is assessed. So, we're going to cover all of the questions that I've ever heard about this program. But if you think of more, please do pop them in the chat. We are going to start off today with a land acknowledgement. The University of Alberta respectfully acknowledges that we are located on Treaty 6 territory. That's also where I am joining you today from my home. I am also on Treaty 6 territory. This is a traditional gathering place for many diverse Indigenous people, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, Saulteaux, Inuit, and many others, whose languages, histories, and cultures continue to influence and enrich our vibrant community. So, quick agenda. So, we're going to start off with what is a bursary. This section is going to have some good eligibility requirements as well, dates, deadlines, that kind of thing. We're going to go through how to fill out the application. So, I'll focus a lot on specific points that students often have issues with when filling out the application. Then there's a little section about what happens after you've done your job and I have to do my job. And then there will be other financial supports at the U of A section at the end of the presentation. And then, as I said, hopefully that all takes maybe an hour, hour and 10 minutes, although sometimes I can get a bit more chatty when I'm at home. Uh, and then we'll have times for questions after that. So to get started, where do you find us after today? So please ask your questions. We are here to help you today. But after today, if you have more questions, please feel free to stop by the Student Service Center, also known as the SSC. They're located in the second floor of the University Commons building. I've put a couple of pictures of the University Commons building because she's so beautiful. So please definitely stop by and see us. They can help you with many things to do with your degree and even after you're done your degree. But to do with financial support, they're there for bursaries, emergency funding, and scholarship and awards questions. So they're not able to help you. They have a direct line to us, Student Financial Support. We don't have an office you can visit, but definitely go check them out, or you can reach out to us directly. Our email is bursaries@ualberta.ca. So it's there. It's going to be at the end of the presentation. Minder's probably going to throw it in the chat right away. That is your line to speak to us directly. But first of all, what is a bursary? So, a bursary is not like a loan. It doesn't need to be repaid, and it's not like a scholarship because it's based on financial need instead of merit. So, it's not based on, you won't get more funding if your GPA is higher. It's based on what your bank account tells us you need. Where does the funding come from? It mostly comes from the University of Alberta administration, but there is a large part of it that comes from donor funding. So that could be people in the community. Maybe they went to the U of A for their undergrad or graduate program, and they'd like to give back to students. So they can set up scholarships or bursaries to help the current generation of students. So some of it comes from that. And then quite a bit of it also comes from the Alberta or the Students' Union Access Fund. So this is something that undergraduate students pay for. Um, I believe it's about $16 per year. So if you do opt out of the Access Fund during your degree, you will get less funding from this section, but you are still eligible to apply for bursary funding. The program is intended to help students who have a shortfall in their financial resources for the current year. So you can only access bursary funding once a year. There are emergency programs that can be accessed more than that, but for bursaries, you can only apply once a year. If you have a lot of savings, investments, family support, or things like that, you're probably not going to be eligible. And the term a lot is hard to sort of quantify right now, but in general, if you have enough to cover your tuition, you're not going to be eligible for a bursary. There's a couple of eligibility requirements. You do have to meet all of these requirements. So you do have to be an international student on a study permit here in Canada, but you must have already been here in Canada for at least 1 year. You have to be in satisfactory academic standing, which does mean something different for us than it does for your faculty. So your faculty, maybe you had a rough year last year and you're on probation that this year, your faculty might say that's not satisfactory academic standing. As far as we are concerned for the bursary application, it is typically if you are eligible to continue in your studies. So if you are on probation, you're still eligible. And if you are in fresh start, you're still eligible. You have to have had a significant change in your circumstances since getting your study permit. We're going to get into a lot more about that later on in this presentation, um, but that is one of the most important eligibility requirements. And you do have to be attending classes in the same term you submit an application. So if you're applying in fall term, you have to have registration in fall term. If you're applying in January, you have to have registration in winter term. So we assess your application based on two eligibility requirements. So there's qualitative and quantitative. So quantitative is what do the numbers say? Does your application show that you have less resources than you do eligible expenses? The qualitative is a little bit more, a little bit less clear, but your application has to show that you have had an eligible change in your circumstances. So you have to be eligible in both of these criteria. If you are ineligible in one, your application will not be considered. So one of the most important things is, does your application show a financial shortfall? The other most important thing is, has there been a change in your circumstances since you got your study permit? And we will get into what eligible changes are a little later. Your status does matter. So if you are an undergraduate student, you are eligible to apply if you are a full-time or part-time student, but you will get less funding if you're a part-time student. For graduate students, you have to have full-time enrollment in either the fall or winter semester. If you are part-time in both, you are not eligible for bursary funding. So you have to, for graduate students, you have to have full-time enrollment in one or the other. So I said earlier that you have to have been in Canada studying for more than 1 year. And why is that? So when you applied through IRCC for your study permit to come to Canada, I'm sure you remember that they required you to have sufficient funding for at least the first year of your studies and a plan for your continued years of study. So the bursary is intended to help students who have had a change in their circumstances so that plan is no longer viable. Whereas you had to have already shown that you had the funding in your hand for the first year. So that is why you are not eligible in your first year. If you are in your first year, you may be eligible next year. So I would recommend, attending this session next year to get information on the bursary then. But you can contact ISVS, the International Student Visitor Service, over in TELUS Center, and ask them about some emergency funding that they have. But we unfortunately would not be able to give you a bursary in your first year. The number one question that we get in these presentations is always, how much funding will you get? And unfortunately, we really aren't able to estimate in advance. You do have to fill the application. We have to go through the application, and then there are maximums that apply. So the yearly maximum it does change, and it can be based on several things, including your program, your level of study, your family size. So if you have a partner or dependents, and of course your demonstrated shortfall. The lifetime maximums are on the website, and lifetime maximums, if it's like your first or second time applying for the bursary, you're not going to be anywhere close to the lifetime maximum. It is sort of based on an average student needing to access bursary funding for the 3 years of their degree. So if you are applying for the third or fourth time, and you'd like to reach out to us first to see if you are eligible still to apply, then definitely feel free to do that before submitting the application. But if it is your first or second time applying, you're not going to be close to getting the maximum amount of funding. Application opens October 1st for most students. It does close depending on your registration. So if you are only registered in fall term, you're finishing up in you're graduating next term, maybe in March or in June, and you don't have winter term registration, you must apply before December 15th. And if you are taking winter term registration, then your deadline is April 15th. So for most students, it will be open from October 1st to April 15th. These are very firm deadlines. If you apply on April 16th, you are too late. So I would recommend applying as soon as you can when the application is open. Things to know before starting. So as I am recording this, and as you are joining me today, the application is not open yet, but you can go in and start collecting the documentation that you're going to need so that you're ready to submit when it does open on October 1st. So what you're going to need is all accounts in your name. So bank accounts, investment accounts, foreign bank accounts as well, that are in your name, and with statements showing what funding you have in those accounts. You'll need to provide your study permit documentation, including your original study permit plan. So many students, they sent a document out to IRCC. We can just take that. That'll work. You don't have to build a whole new document if you already have that. We would have to have documentation of what your change in circumstances are, and then there are some expenses that you can add to the application. The most common ones are health and dental expenses. So if you have a health or dental expense that's not fully covered by your insurance, you can add those to the application. And we would need to see your insurance claims for all of those. So I will get into adding expenses a little bit later, but that's sort of like what you should maybe start getting together this weekend before the application opens. All right, we're going to get into filling out the application. All right, so where do you find it? You're going to start with going to our website is the easiest way. So our website is uab.ca/bursaries. Once you navigate to the International Supplementary Bursary page, it's got lots of information about the deadlines. You'll see a green button that says apply for the International Supplementary Bursary. You'll click on that to get started. That will take you to our portal. The portal also has a short link, which is uab.ca/AFS. AFS stands for Application for Financial Support. So all of the programs that you see on that page can be accessed through this same portal. It will ask you to log in. The login is your CCID and password. And if you are having trouble logging in, it's not really something that we can help you with. So I'd suggest reaching out to IST for help if you are getting an error. Once you get into the AFS portal, then you will see different program cards with all of the different programs that we offer. So you're going to scroll down till you see the one that says International Supplementary Bursary, and you're going to click Apply to begin. Once you get into the application, you'll see a bunch of tabs at the front or at the top. Those are your navigation tabs. So there are different sections of the application, and we're going to go through all of these sections today in the presentation. But you can see that all of them currently have a red exclamation mark in this example. That's because I haven't started this application yet. I haven't added any information or answered any of the questions. So the red exclamation marks are what tells you that you still have something to do with that section. And this is a common motif throughout the entire application. In the top right corner, you'll also see a application ID. So in this case, UAI 33174. That is a quick way for us to find your application. So if you do reach out to us by email, please just reference that number and we can find your application. And then at the bottom of every page, there's a save button. So you will have to click that to move on to the next section. At several points in this application, you will be asked to upload documentation, and it is not a very intuitive process. So, to start with, you're going to fill out that first line. That's all that's going to show up at first. So, in this example, I'm adding a prescription to my expenses tab. So, I've put that as a prescription. I've put the amount that it costs after insurance, $60. I've clicked that I pay this monthly, and then I've hit save. After you hit save, the second line will show up. So, at first, it's just going to be the first line. And then the browse will show up. You're going to find the documentation on your computer, upload it to the application. And if you don't click upload, it doesn't go on to the application. So that can sometimes cause some confusion and frustration. So first you fill it out the first line, you hit save, then you hit upload at the end to make sure your documentation is on the application. So you can see I've done this one correctly because I've got green checks all over the place. If I was missing something, I would have that red exclamation mark that I had missed something. Other quick notes about the application. It does time out quickly on your side and on my side. So make sure that you're saving often. There are a couple of essay questions that you'll have to answer. So it might be helpful maybe to write those out in a Word document first and then add them to the text box just so that you don't lose your place or lose what you've written in if the application times out. Several points in the application, we do use the term year or yearly. This we mean by that is an academic year. It's not the calendar year. So that is a September to April year. Your information, we don't store it on any of our devices. It's seen by usually just one person, the assessor that's assigned to your application. Sometimes a second assessor might have to take a look at it, but typically it will not be seen by more than 1 to 2 staff. And then the most important thing I would like you to come away with after this presentation, the thing that causes, I think, students the most anxiety and me the least is that I do not judge your financial choices. So you will be asked to provide bank statements. And when I'm looking at your bank statements, I'm not going to deny you bursary funding because you go for Starbucks in the morning before class or because you go out for dinner with your friends a couple of times a month. These are like considered normal expenses, and you will not be denied bursary funding because of that. Um, so I think it causes students a lot of anxiety to upload your bank statements. I want you to know, like, I just glazed through most of it. Like 90% of your expenses, I'm not even questioning. We will get into a little bit later what kind of like documentation you should provide for larger expenses. But you're not going to lose bursary funding because you like to go and get Starbucks or Daily Grind or something like that, or hang out at Dewey's a few times. So the first section in the financial support tab is called proof of funds. The proof of funds box, this is where you want to put your original study permit information. So whatever you gave to IRCC, give to us. If you don't have that anymore, then you can collect let us know what you gave them and collect that same documentation. So not an exhaustive list, but things that maybe you included in this section to IRCC was letters from your sponsor, bank statements, or proof of other assets back in your home country. Maybe you were getting an education or student loan from your home country. If maybe you had funds already in a Canadian bank account and that's what you were going to use for your study permit, or if you received scholarships or bursaries or department funding that you were going to use for your study permit. So that's if you have just that one document that you gave to IRCC, just put that on. That'll be fine. You'll also have to upload a valid study permit. So if your study permit is currently being renewed and you don't have one, put the one that is expired, and then also documentation that shows that you have applied for a renewal. There's a section here too about international loans. So if you haven't loaned from your home country, that's part of your funding plan, upload a copy, and then there will be some questions about the amounts in Canadian dollars. So maybe it was a loan that they paid out the full loan in the first year, and that's that. Some loans do disperse on a schedule. So maybe every year they give you $10,000. And if that's the case, then you need to indicate how much you're getting this year, like what is available to you now. Um, I personally, when I'm assessing bursaries, I find international loans to be very complicated and confusing, and sometimes they can be very long documents. So there is another section coming up called Steps that you took to meet your financial needs. Just explain what was going on with this loan, how much you were getting, how much you still have. Um, in that section just to help me out because I really struggle with sometimes they don't even say what currency they're in. So if you can include that information, it's usually pretty helpful to us. The next is that really important section about the changes to your financial plan. So since you got your study permit, something has changed, right? That's why you're applying for bursary funding. What has that change been? What are the extenuating circumstances that you now cannot fulfill that original commitment? So it has to be something that is recent. And when we say recent, we mean since you got your study permit. And it has to be something that you couldn't have anticipated when you got your study permit. So we'll go through a couple of different options of eligible and ineligible reasons. This is, again, not an exhaustive list. So if you're not sure and you want to ask before you fill out your application, definitely do that. So an eligible change, one that we see a lot is if there has been a significant devaluation of your home currency. So maybe your parents send you money every month or every year, or maybe you have a savings account and your currency has significantly devalued. And there's fluctuations all over the world. We know that. Right now, I would say it would be maybe over 50 or 60% devaluation. In that currency. So ones that I'm aware of off the top of my head right now would be like Nigeria, Bangladesh, and Iran have higher than normal currency devaluations. So that might be a valid reason. If you were getting department funding and you are no longer getting department funding, that is a significant change in your study permit plan. Maybe your sponsor has had some kind of drastic change in circumstance. So maybe something has happened with their health or the health of somebody in their family. Maybe their business has failed, the business that they were using to help support you. But something has happened that they can no longer sponsor you to the level that they were before. Or maybe you've gotten married, maybe you've had a child or two since you started your program, and now your expenses are a lot higher than you were planning when you came to Canada as a single person. So those are some examples of what could potentially be an eligible change in circumstances. Um, Ineligible changes are basically anything that you could have anticipated, anything that happened before you got your study permit. So something that you might have been able to anticipate was like your sibling started university and now your sponsor is paying for them instead of paying for you. That would not be an eligible reason because you could have anticipated your sibling starting in um, university. If the cost of living is more than you expected, that would not be an eligible reason because that's something that you could have researched before you came to Canada. If you had assets that you claimed in your permit app or your study permit application that you are going to use and you didn't use them yet, you would have to do that first. Or if your sponsor has just for some reason decided to stop supporting you, maybe they're using those funds to buy a house or get married or something like that. Those are ineligible changes because your sponsor did make a commitment that they would support you as long as they were able to. So that, again, not an exhaustive list of ineligible or eligible reasons, but do feel free to reach out if you have one and you'd like to know if it would be an eligible or ineligible reason. We will need documentation regardless of the reason. So a couple ones that I had talked about in the previous slides. If you had a change in your sponsor's circumstances, your sponsor's business is failing, your home currency is devaluing, they can't help you as much anymore, or the amount of support they're sending you is no longer worth what it used to be worth. They need you to provide you a letter. In that letter, they need to say what the change is and how much they are able to provide you, ideally in Canadian dollars, in that letter. If you are getting department funding and now you're getting less department funding than when you applied for your study permit, or you're getting no department funding. And one of the reasons that might be is your program is taking a lot longer than you expected, and there's no more funding available for you. We would need a letter from your supervisor or your department to confirm this. If you've had like a child since getting married, we would need like your child's birth certificate. If you've gotten married since you got your study permit, we would need your marriage certificate, that kind of thing. Again, if you're not sure what documentation you should provide for this, definitely reach out prior to submitting your application. The last section in this part is what steps have you already taken to meet your financial need? So if you've gotten a job, if you've taken out loans in Canada or back in your home country, have you applied for more scholarships or grants? Have you liquidated some assets? The reason that we're asking this is because bursary funding is very likely not to meet all of your expenses. If you're receiving no support now, when before you were fully funded, we will not be able to make up that entire difference. So like we will not be able to pay all of your tuition or all of your living expenses. So what is the plan for what we can't help with and going forward in the remaining years of your program? This is the section for that. This is also a really good section if the assessor reaches out to you and needs clarity on something and you're not sure where to put it, just throw it in this section. Okay, we're now into the family and living tab. So the reason we're going to ask some of these questions is because we want to know what standard of living costs we can give to your application. So if you have a dependent, that you're going to have more expenses than somebody who doesn't, obviously. So a dependent is not your parents or your partner or your siblings, or if you have children and they're over 18, none of those count as dependents. A dependent is a child under the age of 18 that you are financially responsible for. Typically we say like if this is somebody that you would claim on your taxes as a dependent, then include them here. There's also a place in this section to add any childcare costs that you have. When we say childcare, we are talking pretty much solely about services like daycare or day homes. This is not for like any other increased cost that having children gives you. So it's not for like increased food or, if you had to get a bigger home because you had children now, none of those costs are going to be provided, pretty much just daycare. So you can put that there. And then we're going to ask you about your partner. So if you have a partner is somebody that you are married to or somebody that you are in a relationship with that you have lived with for over 12 months. So if you have a partner, you'll have to include bank statements in their name. If they are a student, maybe at like Norquest or Nate or McEwen, if they're over in one of those places, we would need to get their student um, tuition, so a notice of assessment for them, as well as if they're eligible for student loans, we would need to know what resources they have available to them, if they're a domestic student. If they are a U of A student, they also need to submit an application. And then we would assess your application together, the two applications. If they are not a student and they're working, we'd like to know what their average monthly income is because that's a resource that you have. And then any other resources or expenses that you are jointly responsible for. So I had said earlier something about standard cost of living. So we do not need you to upload 1,000 documents about how much your rent is and how much your phone bill is. We just assume that, or we apply a standard cost of living index to everybody's account. So it is based on how many people are in your family. So somebody who has children and a partner, they have more monthly expenses than somebody who lives by themselves. Um, and that is a flat rate. So it can't be adjusted. So we don't need documentation for any of this stuff. We don't need anything to do with your vehicle, your rent, property tax, condo fees, utilities, grocery estimates, like internet, phone bills, anything to do with like tuition, nothing like that. We don't need to add any of that to the application because it's already included in another area. So good news, you don't have to go look for documentation of all this stuff. But there are things you can add. So the more common things that we see as eligible expenses are health, dental, and practicum expenses. So I've made a list here. This is not an exhaustive list. It's just things that came up top of my head. So very common health expenses are prescriptions. If you go to therapy, um, or physiotherapy, something like that. Those could be eligible expenses. For dental expenses, if you're getting, a yearly cleaning, fillings, x-rays, or if you or your dependent has braces or other orthodontics, those could be added to the application. And then for practicums, co-ops, internships, we're really thinking just hotel and Airbnb costs if it's outside of Edmonton. There's not really too much more that could be included there. So again, not exhaustive, just a list of some things that came up that were are pretty common add-ons to the application. So to add something that is not on the standard list, but you would like to add, you're going to scroll to the bottom of the expenses tab and click add expense. You're going to give a short description of what it is. If it is health or dental, you do need to put it through your insurance first. So insurance is included in both your graduate and non-undergraduate non-instructional fees. So if you opted out of those fees, none of your health or dental will be eligible. You do need to upload your documentation is your insurance claim after you have paid for it and it's gone through insurance, even if the amount that they are covering is zero. So if you've hit like your maximum or it's ineligible for your insurance, it is still worth putting on your application, but you do need to upload that insurance claim. You can add as many document or different lines as you want though to the expenses tab. So here's an example of a added expense. You will see this is very similar to the one that I showed you at the beginning of the presentation. So I've got my monthly prescriptions there. That's my expense. I say that I pay $60 per month for this. I've hit save, and then I am uploading documentation, and the documentation that I'm uploading is from my insurance. Then we're going to get into the resources tab. So resources, can include, I think most students would have like checkings and savings accounts would be pretty common. If you have any investment accounts, those would have to be included as well. If you have a whole bunch of acronymed things, so RESPs, RRSPs, FHSAs, TFSAs, GICs, mutual bonds, or mutual funds or bonds. Those are all in category that I would say if you have them, you know that you have them. And if you don't know what a FHSA is, you probably don't have one. So don't worry about it if you don't have it, but if you have it, you have to include it. I did want to say you do have to include your credit cards and lines of credit on the application. It is added under the resources tab, but it isn't considered a resource in the same way like your savings account is. So when we assess your application, we're asking for your lines of credit and your credit cards because there's probably transactions from your bank accounts to or from those cards. So maybe you use your line of credit to give yourself to help you pay your rent every month. So you're transferring money from a line of credit to your bank account, or you're transferring money from your bank account to pay off your credit card every month. So that's just sort of why we need those. We just want to see where the funds in your bank accounts are coming from and going to. We're not going to tell you that you have another $10,000 on your line of credit that you could utilize first. That's not what this is for. So you don't have to worry about that, but you do need to include them. You do have to add a statement for every account. So a statement is a document from your bank that shows all of the transactions for a certain period of time. So some banks, they will do it on a monthly basis. So August 1st to August 31st. More common is they will do it from the date that you opened up your bank account plus 30 days. Whatever the case is for your bank account, we need the statement that shows August 31st. This is the number one thing that confuses and trips up students. No matter what time of year you apply, we want to know what resources you had before the school year started. And we use a standard date of August 31st. So I have a couple of examples on the side there. So the very first one, nice and easy, August 1st, August 31st, that's the one we need. Second couple are, they start a little bit later, mid to late August, and they go to mid to late September. Because they contain August 31st, that is still the date, the statement that we want. The last two are the complete opposite. They start in early August and they end in early September. That is a statement we want because it contains August 31st. So no matter what, August 31st. Very, very, very rarely we will ask for different statements. Um, in that case, we'll reach out to you and request updated statements, and we will tell you what date we want to see. But 99% of students need to do August 31st. So assume that you are not the special one and you need to do August 31st. If you have any questions about that, please pop them in the chat. To add all of your accounts, you're going to go to the Resources tab and you're going to scroll down until you see a bunch of check boxes. You're going to check off all of the account types that you have. So in this example, I've checked off that I have a checkings, a savings, a TFSA, and an RESP. Then I'm going to add information and a statement about each of my bank accounts. So in this one, I've added a checkings account. My institution is the name of the bank. So it is TD. And the amount is the amount that was in that bank account on August 31st. We do check all of that. So if it's not right, don't worry about it. Once you hit save, that documentation line will show up. So I've added a statements for my checkings and I've added a statement for my savings. And you see that there is a check marks across the board. I have done this correctly, and it will not let me proceed until I have added a statement for every single account type that I have. So you do also need to annotate your statements. So annotating is just writing on your statements to explain where funds came from or went to. So typically we would only require this for transactions of over $500. So more than $500 coming in, more than $500 going out. If you're annotating your statements and it's something that's like pretty obvious, like maybe it says payroll, right? That's clearly you have a job, and that is what that is. You don't need to label that. If it says that it's going to the University of Alberta tuition account, I'm pretty clear on what that is. The things that we're really concerned about are transfers in and out of your account that we can't immediately tell what they are. So maybe it was a cash or a check deposit. Or you e-transfer your landlord. If it doesn't specifically say that it's for, landlord, I don't know what that transaction is. So you're going to want to go through and label all of your transactions of over $500. Included a couple options here. There's a couple of different ways that you could do this. So a few of them, I printed out my PDF, I wrote on them, and then I rescanned them in, or I used a PDF editor. If you don't want to do either of those, then you can include like a separate document that has a list of all of the transactions of over $500. We would need that in as well as the statement. So you can't just provide a list of all of your transactions over $500. We do need to see everything. Um, all of these are acceptable ways to label your statements. Incomplete or incorrect bank statements is absolutely the number one reason that an application is delayed. So before you submit your application, make sure that you can answer all of these questions about your statement. So does it have is it direct from your bank? Does it have your first and last name on it? Does it have August 31st on it somewhere? Does it show your running account balance? So that means when funds come in or go out of your account, it updates every single after every single transaction, not just like at the end of the term. Does it clearly show all of your rent payments and other living expenses? And is everything that is over $500 labeled? Other resources that you can have, maybe you have family support um, from your parents or other family members, and they help you out with your expenses. That was part of your study permit plan. So I've included a screenshot here. In this screenshot, my parents helped me with they gave me $18,000 to help me with my fall tuition. They don't give me anything every month. So one of the most common mistakes that we see in this section is that people will account for the funds in both sections. So they will put $1,000 a month, $8,000 per year. That's now counting that twice. So only put if they do send you monthly and yearly support, that's fine. But if they only send one or the other, make sure it's in the correct box. You would have to also upload documentation about this. So if it's from like a family member, they would have to write a letter basically just saying how much they are providing you. If it hasn't shown up in your bank statements in September, or sorry, in August, um, maybe have a note in there about what time they're sending it to you, what day of the year they're going to send it to you. And that is for the entire academic year, September to April. If you are a graduate student, you're probably receiving department funding if you are doing a thesis-based program. So if you are doing a thesis-based program and you have an assistantship through either a TA, an RA, or a graph, you would have to upload all of your documentation for the current academic year um, for those programs. And then we get to the additional information tab. So it's going to ask some demographic information about you, stuff like, where did you go to high school? Are you the first in your family to um, attend university? That kind of thing. This information is used to match you with bursary funding. So at the beginning of the presentation, I said that, there's some of the funding comes from donors, and donors, when they submit things, they can choose some criteria that they would like us to give the students, or they would like the students to have before they give the funds. So a pretty common one is, somebody went to the U of A, they went on, had a successful career, and they would now like to give money to students who have the same circumstances that they have. So perhaps they're like from a rural location. They would also like the funds to go to a student from a rural location, or maybe they were the first person to leave home to go to university in their family, and they really want to help support students in that situation as well. So that's what we're using it for. When I do my assessment of your application, I don't see any of that. It has no effect on if you're eligible for bursary funds or how much bursary funds you're eligible for. If we can't match you with donor funding, we just take it from a different pot. We just take it from the funding that comes from the administration. Your answers, or if you choose not to answer at all, that's fine. There is no pressure there. And then you are almost done. You just have to read the applicant declaration and check off that you've done it. Once you do that, the button at the bottom of the page will be illuminated, and you can then submit the application. So if it won't let you, if that button is still grayed out, you probably missed something on the application. So do a quick scan of those top tabs. You'll see one of them will probably have a red exclamation mark. So in this particular application, I've missed something on the financial services or financial situation tab. So I would go back to that section to see what I missed, and then I would be able to submit my application. Okay, so you've done your part. Now what? Now I do my job. And Minder is going to laugh at me in the chat when I say this, but it is actually a relatively simple mathematical equation. We're going to take your application and we're going to see if your eligible expenses are greater than your eligible resources. So if that is the case, and if you are qualitatively eligible. So your reason that you are applying for bursary funding this year is an eligible reason to apply for bursary funding. We will award you with some bursary funds to help you bridge the gap. If, though, we're going through the application during assessment and we think that there's something missing, or we need something more clarity on something, or we need different statements, which we're not going to need because everybody's going to put August 31st statements on their application, we will reopen your application. So what that means is when you submit your application, you'll get a notice that it's submitted. When your assessor opens the application to start looking at it, they will mark it as under review. And when we reopen it, we set it back to in progress so you can make changes. So I've included a screenshot here of what it would look like in your messages in that situation. You do also get these to your U Alberta email. So please keep an eye on your email after you've applied for a bursary. Check your spam too. We can't keep going until you resubmit the application. So if the last status on your application is in progress, your application is not currently in the queue to be assessed. But you passed all that. We're able to grant you bursary funds. What happens then? You're going to accept an offer in Bear Tracks. The funds will be applied to your Bear Tracks first. So it will first go to any outstanding tuition or fees that you have for the current or previous academic years. And then if there's anything left over after that, then we will do an e-transfer through Pay My Tuition. And this refund process does take several weeks and involves multiple departments. So it's not something that can be sped up. The bursary application is not a emergency program. So we assess on a rolling basis. We hit the ground running as soon as it opens on the 1st. It can take, if you're applying October 1st, up to 6 to 8 weeks. That's a really high volume time for us. We go as fast as we can. The earlier you apply, the faster it will be assessed, but it can be a pretty long delay. But if after you've applied or after you've been awarded funding, something has changed again in your circumstances. So maybe maybe your registration has changed. And when you applied, you only had fall term registration, and now you have fall and winter registration. Or maybe you've had a baby, or you've gotten married, or your department funding has changed, something like that. If there is an additional expense you would like us to add, you don't have to submit a new application, amazingly, because that would take forever. You just have to send us an email and outline the change. We will tell you if we need more documentation and if there is additional funding that we can possibly add. Um, the deadline to do this is April 30th. That is a very firm deadline. So again, we are not, same thing, all of our deadlines with bursary funding are very firm. If you are asking for a reassessment to add spring and summer costs, that is technically possible if you are required to take spring and summer. So if it is part of your standard program structure, you can add that. You have to reach out to us before April 30th, but after you have registration in the spring and summer term. So some programs that might have this requirement are graduate students. Anything to do with medicine and dentistry typically have like 10-month or 12-month programs. If you're doing a co-op, a practicum, or an internship that is required for your program, then those would be eligible to add for bursary funding. But if you are taking spring and summer courses by choice, not part of a required program structure, it is not going to be eligible. So if you're taking a course, if you failed a course previously and you want to take it again in spring, summer, that would not be eligible. If you want to take courses in spring, summer, so you can take less during the school year, or so that you can graduate earlier, that won't be an eligible reassessment reason. So if you're not sure if your program requires spring, summer terms, definitely reach out to us and we can take a look. All right, we are done talking about bursaries, but there are a couple more financial supports that I would like to make sure that everybody is aware of. So we also have emergency loans, scholarships, and I did mention previously there is International Student Services. They're over in Telus Center. They might have some options for you as well. We run scholarships 101 courses or presentations in late fall and early winter that help set you up for success to apply for scholarships for the next academic year. So if you're in your second year, you had to apply for scholarships before January 10th. For continuing students, which you all should be continuing students now, then the application is open from February to March every year. If you are graduating in June or in March this year, you are still going to be eligible for convocation scholarships. So make sure you still fill out that application in February or March. Um, and if you are a graduate student, this is only for undergraduate students. We do not have anything to do with graduate student scholarships, so please reach out to the Faculty of Graduate Studies for that. You can check out more information or see if you can get into a Scholarships 101 session or watch an old recording at uab.ca/awards. We do also have emergency loans. So bursary, not an emergency program. Emergency loans are. So this is for if you're having like a short term, but like immediate problem. It has a very quick turnaround. It's 1 to 2 business days before you have funds in your account. You do have to demonstrate that you can repay the loan within 6 months, but you can repay it with bursary funds. So if you're applying for both at the same time and you're approved for bursary funds, we can use the bursary funds to pay off the emergency loan. So that's an option if you do need emergency funding. And then finally, we do have some resources and workshops for just general financial literacy. So that's stuff like budgeting, managing credit cards and debt, um, saving money, tax advice, things like that. So those, the information, there is information on our website at all times. And then we also do run workshops throughout the year. So if you're interested in the workshop or just to take a look at what resources we have there, you can find those on our website, uab.ca/financial been lit. And we are done. That is it. Okay, here's our information. You can find us uab.ca/SAFS. You can contact us, bursaries@ualberta.ca, or you can visit the Student Services Center on that second floor of University Commons if you have any questions. Um, Minder and I will hang out in the chat for just another like 15 to 20 minutes if you have any questions, but I will end the recording here. So thank you so much for joining us and have a great night.